Hi, welcome to Industrial Controls and Automation RSLogix tutorials. My name is Rowan and I will be doing a series of these videos in order to help students understand the RSLogix software better, which at times can be frustrating and confusing, and hopefully this set of tutorials will help you out. So this is just the introduction video, so there will be a few things that I'm going to cover. First thing is just opening the software. This is going to be very specific to Wright State in our laboratory. If you're not at Wright State, that's okay. The next is going to be creating a project, creating and setting properties of an emulator I/O, and communicating with the emulator. So the first thing you're going to want to do is locate the software. So the software here is going to be located under the Start menu, All Programs, and then you're going to scroll down till you get to Rockwell Software. And under Rockwell Software, we're going to be using RSLogix 5000, which is under the Enterprise series, and there's RSLogix 5000. Now it takes a few minutes to load up, so I've already preloaded that software. The other software we use in lab is going to be RSLogix Emulate 5000. Now an emulator helps simulate a PLC so that we can test our software without actually connecting it to the hardware. This you will find is very handy. Now I've preloaded it because it does actually take a couple minutes to load up the software, and I don't have that much time in these videos. So once you've loaded the software, this is going to be the first screen that you see, and you can do a couple things from here. You can open a project that you've previously worked on, or you can start a new project, and then there's just some other things that are important to this class. So I'm going to select New Project. Once I do that, it's going to ask me to put in some controller properties here. Now you'll notice it sets itself up to start at the emulator, which is really handy for us because that's what we're going to be using. If though you didn't have an emulator and you needed to select a specific PLC, you could do that as well. We're going to name this, for this tutorial I'm just going to call it Tut, the King Tut of emulators. And chassis. So the chassis, also known as the back plane, is where all the card slots and the processor are located. So in this class we're going to use 4, but you have 7, 10, 13, 17, all kinds of different configurations that could be used. Alright, now we're going to put this in slot 1, so we're just going to leave it there every time. Select OK. Alright, so now that you have set up an emulator, or excuse me, now that you have set up a processor, which happens to be an emulator, we are ready to do a little bit more with it. So our basic screen here doesn't look like there's much we can do. We can do some programming, but we're not ready for that yet. So up top we have some tabs, and the important one we're going to talk about here in a moment is the Communications tab. But before we do that, let's set up our I/O. So here in the controller organizer, keep going down until you get to I/O configuration. Alright, and then select the back plane and right click on it. When you right click, you're going to select the new module. And of course here's where things can get kind of crazy. If you don't know what you're looking for, Control Net Bridge, DH, Control Net Bridge, this can be very confusing. We're going to eliminate some of that confusion by just unchecking this box and selecting Other. So that's just going to give us a generic 1756 module. That is what we want. In the future you may want analog, communication, different types of inputs and outputs, but for this class this is what we're going to use. So hit Create. You can name this, so I'm just going to name this Input Output. Okay, you don't have to name it, but sometimes I find it handy to. In the real world you are going to name it and you're going to write a description as well. So now we need to select where it's located. So there'd be a physical place if this was a physical chassis, and it can't be in slot 0 or slot 1. So we're going to select slot 2. Now right here we have something called connection parameters. Those are outside of the scope of this class, so we're not going to talk about what these edits mean, but when you come into the lab, please just do this as I show you. So inputs are 1, 2, outputs are 2, 1, and the configuration is 16 and size 0. All right, select OK. And we're going to change this packet interval to 50 milliseconds. When you use an emulator, sometimes there's some delay built into your computer, so having a little larger packet interval will help there be less faults. So we're going to apply that and hit OK. So now we have created our I/O, we have created our emulator processor. Now it's time to communicate to them. If you don't communicate to them, you can never test your software once you've started programming. So we're going to go up here to the Communications tab, and we have several options here. The first time you communicate to any PLC, you need to use whoactive. That's very important to remember. Lots of people make mistakes trying to download it to a PLC they never talked to. It creates a path for your communication. So select whoactive. Okay, we are using an emulator, so that might give you some intuition that this is a virtual chassis. So we're going to select the virtual chassis, and then from the drop-down box, you'll notice in slot 1, there's our emulator. From there, you're going to go online. Upload and download we'll cover a little bit more later. And connected to go online. So now this downloads information to the emulator. We'll go ahead and do that. If there's faults, you'll see flashing, and we'll want to figure that out. So download, and then this little box, just make sure that we don't kill anybody in the plant if we're working with robotics or big machinery. So download. So it's going to compile the routines. And I was working on this earlier. This is why this box showed up. Normally this wouldn't show up right away. So what you would have is you look at your lights. So the controller is okay. That's good. The I/O is okay. That's good. That means you don't have any programming faults yet. Of course, we haven't written any programming yet, so that's a good reason that's okay. But right now we are not running live. So we want to go to remote program, and we want to change that. We could go offline, but right now we want to change it to run mode. And there we go, change controller mode to run mode. Yes. And when all the buttons are green, that means everything is functioning correctly. When you're done testing it out, you're going to go back up to Communications and select Offline. Well, that's all I wanted to review for this video. Tune in for the next one, and we will look at some of the more specifics here in RSLogix. Thank you very much.